What is going on, everybody? Hope you're all having a great Wednesday. BobbyFi with my man Eric Sheets Haber. Had a couple of good runs last night. It was, some chances. It was exciting for a little bit, but ended up making a small profit. Sort of fizzled out with my early stacks. It was looking good with Boston and Detroit. They just kept leaving everybody on base and just couldn't quite get the big hits. So that was a little frustrating. And then the Yankees obviously went off, which was good for me, but at the same time, couldn't get the complementary stacks quite right. I did have a lot of Atlanta. But my problem was I would stack Atlanta on. I was talking about this on air with Rhodey. I was stacking Atlanta on the infield, the Yankees in the outfield, which usually included Gallo. Stanton and Judge obviously had huge games. But if I could have made that little Soler swap and then done something different elsewhere and played Soler in my outfield, obviously that would have been great. I was trying to stack the infields and then use my favorite outfielders. I did like Soler, but I just happen to like a ton of other guys on the Giants slate. So that one kind of hurt. But overall, still a good night. Sheets, you were at Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga, which is awesome. Talk a little briefly about that, and then we'll.
That was a lot of fun. Radio City Music Hall was quite packed, and New York City was in full gear. Not to get too into it, there were protests, there was personality, there was fights, there was non-fights, there was love, there was hate. Everything that makes New York City, New York City. It was great. And DFS, I had a couple of stabs. For some reason, the Pittsburgh Milwaukee game, I had kind of game stack in like a qualifier or something, and whatever reason, everybody in the game did well. I had Polanco from Pittsburgh, who took like 25 fantasy points without really doing much, and got to extra innings too. I needed one more swipe, so I ended up not doing all that great. But tonight, it's the debut, right? It's the debut of Mr. Scherzer in LA, correct?
Yeah, it is. Should be an interesting.
And I'll tell you this. I could tell my grandchildren that Jameson Taillon was $1,100 more than Max Scherzer. I could tell my grandchildren that Jake Odorizzi was, you know what I mean? Was
500 more, yeah.
This is quite. Excuse. I could tell my grandchildren that for 300 less, I could play Casey Mize, like for example. That's kind of. I mean, we talk about disrespect, but I mean, boy, oh boy, it's kind of rough. I know he's playing the Astros, but wow, that's
Yep.
I think he's going to be played by a certain subset of the population, that being a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's even like on his normal rest, and he's going to be popular, but I definitely am going to have a lot of exposure there. There's a lot of pitching options as we get through this slate that you can go a lot of different routes, and I think that they all have some viability. So I think we should start off going game by game, and then we can do our thing and sort of go over everything at the end. I want to ready to start off with Washington, Philadelphia.
Yeah. I wanted to try to, as long as you're going to go game by game, I do want to just at least remember to highlight at least some one-offs if I'm not going to get to any of the stacks, you know what I mean? Just or something. So I'm not getting either of the pitchers here. And with respect to the hitting, I really wasn't getting into either of these teams to stack, but I'm just kind of looking at my thing. And I guess Yadiel Hernandez at 2,400 is a good cheap one-off. He's looking good on my board. And even looking for one-offs is kind of hard in this game. I don't really like this game much at all.
I think this is a really good get off the chalk game. Okay. I don't know how much they're going to be owned. I don't think it's going to be too much because of the pricing, but we've seen Washington essentially sort of give up. They don't, I'm not afraid of Espino, leaning a little bit more Phillies than Nationals at the moment, because this Nationals lineup is garbage, but they do have some cheap options. Like, obviously the Sanchez, Hernandez, Stevenson, Q-Boom are always all real cheap, which makes it really easy to fit in Juan Soto if you wanted to do a stack that way. I do think Soto is an awesome one-off. But I think Philly is probably the team I'd rather stack if I had to choose between the two of them. And I do kind of like Philly a little bit. I don't know where they're going to end up by the end for me, because there's some stacks that really stand out. but this is a big slate that's going to, from a hitting perspective, be very slanted towards Colorado and the Yankees. So anything to get a little bit different and maybe use those other ones as complementaries is interesting to me. Maybe you can do it even a 3-man with, Harper, Real Muto, and Miller, not the cheapest 3-man in history and going to be hard to pay up elsewhere. Maybe you make it a Jankowski, Miller, and Harper or something like that. They're kind of expensive. It's going to make it hard to play them. So I'm kind of interested in the Philly stack against this bullpen that's been terrible since the break, and Espino. And then I do think under normal circumstances, we would be talking about stacking both these sides, and I'm open to it, but I'm more on the Philly side than I am on the Nats, although I do love Soto as a one-off, and then potentially one of the cheap guys you could play with him.
I think that's fair enough, your analysis from the perspective of the slate, that, with the exception of Colorado and the Yankees, like that you want to start trying to figure out what, aside from those teams, you want to try to aim for. I mean, I had 2 others that we'll get to, but yeah, I'm kind of changing. I'm with you a little bit. Like, you do want to try to pick around, and I do actually like a little bit of Washington in there. It's just kind of a wall of teams that are just below, so you could almost, I won't say blindly, I would say blindly pick the lowest owned, but if you could find a good low owned one with actual, power upside, then I think that's how you separate. Like, I could make the case for Texas, like, for example,
right?
But I don't know why bother? You know what I mean? Like, maybe you're right. Maybe you should look more at this Philly Washington game.
Right. I just think it's going to be one of those games that we look at the end, and we're going to be like, okay, well, that's one we certainly could have gotten behind. Anyway, all right, you ready to move on to Baltimore and the Yankees?
By the way, I forgot to take my very lukewarm but pretty real victory lap on the Matt Harvey call from a couple from his last start.
Oh yeah.
I can't take really victory lap because I'm not even actually sure I played him. But he put up 24 fantasy points in a 4-3 game with that 5,100.
Yeah.
I am not going to be playing him today, though. It's a little more complicated than running him out against Detroit or whoever he was against last time. And I do think that the Yankees are, if you ran this through a computer, I mean, a real simulator that like actually tell you like how often they would score well and this, all that stuff, and how much they're going to be owned. I promise you they're going to be owned too much. They just are. That doesn't mean that they're not going to win. It doesn't mean they're not going to get there, but you have a combination of everything. Like you have, everybody likes to pick on Matt Harvey, right? You have everybody likes to play the Yankees. And you have Yankee name recognition and the new guys playing for the Yankees and the Yankees coming off a big freaking game. This is going to be like massive non-course chalk, and again, depending on how many lineups you do, depending on what you want to go. Remember, it is baseball, and while they scored 13 last night, they scored 2 the night before or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's possible, and not them. Matt Harvey is not capable of giving up 8 runs in the first inning, which he certainly can, and Baltimore's bullpen is certainly capable of giving up another 10 in the rest of the game. Just watch the ownership in this game because it is a big slate, and believe it or not, I'll bet you, I probably have this number somewhere, that between Colorado, Chicago, and the Yankees, if you took all 3 of those teams, you're probably not even a favorite to be the top scoring stat. You know what I mean? If you get those 3 and I get the other 25 teams or whoever else is playing today, I'm pretty sure that it's gonna be somebody else, just the way math works. But that said, good spot, good hitters, good park, good everything. But just watch the ownership a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get lower ownership on certain guys in the stack. And now here's the thing. Let me just point out here's the reason you can argue against Harvey. Now, partly this has been because he's been bad early. He's really done a good job, if you want to call it that, of keeping his walks down this year, which is basically means he's just getting hit hard all the time. But he hasn't given up a home run his last 5 starts, and he hasn't given up a home run 7 of his last 8 starts.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Some of those starts were 3 2/3, but the last 3 have all been 6. He's gone 6 innings the last 3 starts in a row. Now this Yankee lineup obviously is a little tougher than that, but there's your argument for maybe not necessarily not stacking the Yankees, but for not stacking the Yankees, but maybe still playing pieces of them, because I think there's huge home run upside here against Harvey, and I think it's honestly a little bit more fluky that he hasn't given up the home runs than anything else. And I am going to have the Yankees as a priority, but I'm going to have them try and be my complimentary 3-man stack, things like that. Or I'll include Gleyber Torres, who's not going to be owned at all. I may include Rudin Odor, who should be a little bit lower owned, although it'll probably come up throughout the day. And DJ LeMahieu would be the other one who people are going to overlook. It happened last night a little bit to some extent. You know, I mean, you had a pretty popular Yankees stack, but like a 4% owned, where everybody else is 20% owned, you got a 4% owned Gleyber, and you've got, a 6% owned DJ, and they both came through nicely last night, and then they totally have that ability to. I don't know if I'm going to get to Brett Gardner, because I mean, if you want to talk about looking washed, this guy certainly fits that bill. He did hit a home run a few weeks ago, and that was pretty amazing.
Listen to us, we're talking about him. Oh wow, he hit a home run a few weeks ago.
But I think your priorities. I think Gallo is the best play, actually, just because of Harvey's, ability to. I mean, lefties and righties both hit him hard, but lefties especially. Low strikeout Harvey versus power lefties, which is what Gallo is, and a high strikeout guy. I think that Gallo is the number one for me, with Judge and Stanton right there behind. Stanton's way too cheap again, so I would put Stanton potentially even a little bit ahead of Judge, but they're pretty close. And early projections don't have the Yankees as owned as I would have thought. And if that's the case, I'm happy to fully stack them against Baltimore's awful bullpen and Harvey. But I do think there are other ways we can go on this slate. In fact, coming up in this next game. Also, I wanted to ask you about Tyon. I don't think I'm going to end up using him tonight just because there's too many other pitchers. He was pitcher of the month last month in the American League, which is a pretty big turnaround from where he was going. But he's been really strong lately. I just don't think I'm going to be able to do it with the other guys at the top, but he's definitely one of the guys.
Yeah. Not that today's any different. Well, it's a little different, but he has, he has been better. I mean, he's had some okay matchups too, but he played Boston. He played against Boston, Houston. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm not doing that at 10.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to end up getting to it, but just, last night on the big slate, and I'm not saying it was right. Buehler was, 6 innings, 5. He gave up 6 innings. He gave up 1 run, only had 5 strikeouts. But Buehler, as the most expensive pitcher, the fact that he was 2% owned when he and Wheeler are clearly the best pitchers on the slate is kind of, and especially with all the value out there, it's just kind of like, okay, people are getting a price thing locked into their brain, and they're looking too much at point per dollar, in my opinion, is when it comes to pitching. You just want to try and take the best guys if you can at low ownership. And yesterday was a good example of that.
My best thing yesterday, I had like almost all Cease. That was fun actually. But
yeah, he was great.
Get through, yeah. All right. So you're talking about Cleveland. It's so funny. You say, okay, let's speaking about these another game you might want to pivot or do whatever. So Cleveland, Toronto, I actually have a kind of a ridiculous Cleveland idea. And it's really funny because maybe it's just the way that I look, my models and projections come up with. I always end up with much less respect for Steven Matz than I should.
Probably appropriate.
I don't know. Maybe he's a Long Island guy. Maybe I have some anti-Steven Matz bias or something like that. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't mind a little bit of Cleveland. They as far as a zero own thing that to get off the chalk. You get Ramirez at who's going to play him at 6,000, and then Reyes. I mean, you could certainly play him. They just don't seem to have that pop anymore. I don't know. Hey, you do have Miles Straw now. That's great. I don't know. I Rosario, Harold Ramirez. I don't know if that's going to win a 15.
There's all pieces of everything you just said are things that I've thought about. When we look at this slate as a whole, I don't know that that's what I want to do, but I think that if you look at like Harold Ramirez as a one-off at 2,600, that's an interesting way to go.
Right.
You look at Jose Ramirez, always an awesome play, and because he's 6K, let's say he was 5,500, he'd probably even get some ownership here, but 6K is going to there's a mental thing. Reyes, he's been hitting lefties this year, but he's generally, and I don't worry about ownership in this one, but I don't know if I want to use that extra outfield spot on two of my outfield spots on Cleveland outfielders because there's so many good ones out there today. So I think Rosario and both Ramirez's, Harold and Jose would be my favorite, and it would be a 3-man stack for me. Where do you stand with the Blue Jays? Because I think this is the offense that
I think that's totally the natural pivot. I think that's what you really want to. If you can get to it, I think that's what you probably want to do. You want to play Toronto. They're the same profile. I mean, same profile. It's the same. Not even the same profile as the Yankees. I mean, they're expensive, but they're going to be what, half, 20%, 30% of the ownership of the Yankees. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be much lower owned. And they certainly have a lot of power, and I would go for the expensive guy. Guerrero, Springer. Wow, Corey Dickerson, didn't even know he was on the team. Semien, Teoscar Hernandez, Bichette. I mean, as many of them I can get in. I think they could score 15 runs. You know what I mean? Like it's certainly they could certainly score like what the Yankees could score at much lower ownership. I think it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to think Toronto might be a better full stack than. So you look at Mejia, okay? Since they extended him into regular starters role, because he was pitching like 1 inning at a time to start the season, 2 innings, 1 inning. Since he got his regular 5-inning role, he's giving up about 3 home runs per 9, which is pretty high against a team that already has arguably the most power in the major leagues. Right there, certainly the Blue Jays. And I just think this is going to be really, really tough on him. And I would like it to get some lefties in there, but we don't have that many to choose from outside of, Dickerson. But I'm very much on this Toronto side of things. I think they're going to be lower owned than they should be. And, it's still a good hitter's park. It's not the same park that we had them hitting in for a while. It's not Coors North anymore, but it's certainly good enough for me. So,
how are we gonna play these guys? I guess hopefully we can get to some pitching later. I mean, because I don't know if we're gonna be able to get to any of this.
As I mentioned, every day there is endless amounts of value. Toronto, with the great outfield that they have, you can play Semien, Bichette, and Guerrero on the infield. Maybe use 1 or 2 of the one outfielder, and then you can find the value elsewhere. Especially on a Wednesday where there are going to be different people resting and things like that. You're going to have some other value spots. We just mentioned Hernandez on the other side of this as an example of it. I'm sorry, Ramirez at 2,500. I think you can find ways to do that. And people, I mean, look, that's what I've been doing a lot lately is that, you could pay up for the Toronto infield, for example, and then you could go out and play, all these, we've had the cheap Pirates lately, but today, you have the cheap Cleveland. There's some other cheap bats that we'll talk about as we keep going. But I'm on board. I think the one thing is that a couple of guys have brought up on other shows that I kind of agree with. I don't really love playing the catcher from the, like if Reese McGuire was 2K, it'd be a little different. But a guy with this limited of power upside, in fact, a couple of the hits he's had lately have been bunt base hits. Right. I'm just not as into playing the catcher spot and using one of my Toronto guys that way, which, again, I like to stack on the infield. So it doesn't, I don't know. That's just the one thing I might stay away from playing the catcher in their stacks, as well as Bryce Valera. I'm not going to be playing any of them at the minimum costs. I would rather just use play the good guys and find the value elsewhere. But I really like these. And Lourdes Gurriel at 4,100 would stand out to be the best. Well, Gurriel and Dickerson both are pretty solid plays there at the bottom. So I like both of those guys quite a bit. I'm into Toronto today, and even flirting with, like a Toronto New York build, it feels really good. And I think that you can get it at lower ownership than what people might think, at least early in the day.
Assuming you don't play Giolito and Scherzer together, which you don't have to, and you certainly can. You're running into like a whole bunch of these other pitchers, as far as I'm concerned, they're really close, and 2 of them are in this next game for me. Both Carrasco and Zach Thompson, I think, are both in play. And Carrasco, I never play him. And
he hasn't been healthy for like 3 years.
I know, but when he comes back, like he just gets lit up. You know what I mean? Like, he is showing up for me as a decent play. And if you want to save money, Zach Thompson at 7K is showing up for me also. So I think that both of these pitchers are sort of in play for me, especially if you want to pay up for some of the bats that we've kind of talked about. Hitting wise, yeah, I have Miami as a team to play in my, Scherzer Giolito lineups. Have Miami as a team to play, just kind of get off the chalk, sort of. And it's a little dirty to play Miami always, especially after they traded Marte. And I think they traded Duval also. Is that possible? They don't really have much, but I mean, it's baseball. Maybe I'll play like a 3-man with them or something like that. And I didn't quite get to the Mets today. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I just don't think getting into like playing Miami guys is really a viable alternative. I mean, it's just I don't want to be the site that that names every stack, but I do think talking about certain maybe some pieces or something. Maybe you've got an argument. I just would want to know who those pieces are. Lewis Brinson.
All right. Well, I will say. I mean, to be fair, again, for those of you that have access to to premium, you'll look at my rankings, my stack rankings. I actually do have Miami ranked like 7th. You know what I mean? So I'm not like just kind of fishing. I'm actually like of the non chalky things. I have them up there. That was one of the. I wrote down only 7 stacks total to talk about, and one of them happened to be Miami. So let me identify who I liked there. I've heard of some of these guys. Not one of them is not Brian De La Cruz, but I have him in my list. Magnivius, Sierra, Aguilar, Alfaro, and Isaiah Diaz. Those would be the guys that I would punt.
Magnier Herrera has not had a double-digit fantasy point game this season. That's almost impossible to do. Even if you only have 2 at-bats in a game, it's really hard to do. I could see Aguilar and Brinson and Alfaro. That's all I've got, unless I just think this. The problem is this is probably a spot where Carrasco pitches fine. He threw 58 pitches his first time pitching this season. There's no way in the world you're getting me to play him on this slate. There's too much good pitching. I will, however, play Zach Thompson. I know it's not as good of a matchup for him, but this guy has good stuff. They've never seen him before. We just saw, he's had the one sort of down game against the Padres, and then he didn't pitch great against the Phillies, but we've seen a couple really, really good starts out of him from the teams that hadn't seen him, Washington, Chicago, Atlanta the first time around. I think there's enough K upside for him at 7K to make him viable, where I just don't know how many pitches we're getting out of Carrasco. And honestly, I have even similar worries for Thompson and how much they'll let him go into the game, but he has at least been pitching in the 80s up to the 90s at times. A little worrisome is, it's funny, he pitched great against Atlanta, and he pitched 5 strong innings earlier this year, but he only threw 66 pitches. So I just don't know if it's worth it by the end of it. I do have him on my list early as a spend down option, but I don't know if we need to do that because of what else is out there. And I just can't get to any bats in this game. This is a really strong slate. Oh, you know what? I can change it. I'll change that. Nimmo and Alonso, I don't mind much, but I just don't think I'm going to end up getting to any of it really.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can I make a request?
Yeah.
Can we get a power outage in all stadiums for this afternoon?
What happened? You got something already going in the morning?
Are you watching? I shared my screen just now. Here.
Oh, I didn't see.
Polanco.
Oh, boom, right off the bat. There you go.
Polanco, let's go.
I'm surprised he's even 15% on. That's pretty sweet.
And I've got a guy in that game in a 4-game slate who's 0.7% on.
Who is that? Oh, Nick Gordon.
Guy probably battles Magnificent Sierra for most fantasy points for the
day. Now Sierra's going to hit 2 home runs for the first time in his career. That's hilarious.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, let's move over to Boston and Detroit. Why don't you start us off? Are you interested in either of these pitchers?
Yeah, sure. So again, if I don't want to play Scherzer and Giolito, I actually do have Erod as my next highest ranked guy. So yeah, I do like Erod, and I think Boston falls within that, that group of, of hitting teams with upside, that if you want to pivot off of Yankees, Colorado, etc., you could play. I don't know if I'm going to get to them though. And that's what I got. You like Casey Mize? You like Erod? You like anything?
I like Erod. I don't think he's the highest priority for me. I mean, there's some good pitchers on this slate, like,
Yep.
and he's one of them. He hasn't been the same guy for the most part, but the problem is, like, he's got to face Toronto and the Yankees every time out there. That's rough business.
Yep.
So getting a matchup against Detroit should be a welcome sight for him. And he's he's got the strikeout upside. I definitely can get behind playing some Erod here. Even his last game against Toronto, where they roughed him up, he struck out 8 guys in 3 1/3 innings. It wasn't like he's not fooling people too. And if you can cut down some of the hard hit stuff, which Detroit should help him out with, I'm a little bit interested in him here. I can't get to Casey Mize, and likewise, I'm not going to get to Boston. Detroit's bullpen is terrible. Casey Mize is not. I believe in Casey Mize's talent. They've let him go the last couple games and throw more pitches. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but he is a guy who keeps the ball on the ground. It's obviously a park downgrade in general for Boston. So I am having some JD Martinez and pretty much nobody else from Boston, with maybe throwing in a Renfroe because he's been hot. He makes sense a little bit as a one-off, but it'll be Erod for me at probably similar to the field, around 25% ownership, and pretty much nothing else from this game for me.
Next game.
You had your American League MVP, which is the first time in history where I might agree that the MVP winner, let's say he doesn't, let's say that Vlad wins the Triple Crown. I've always said that it's impossible for a guy to win the Triple Crown and not win the MVP. Well, if your pitcher is an all-star pitcher also, on top of that, Ohtani.
I don't know if I could give Kobe Allard the MVP so quickly. But we'll see. Maybe he has a good second half of the year. We'll see how that goes.
Well, it's funny you mention him, because I actually kind of like Allard as a long shot play today.
I like both of these guys. It's disgusting.
Okay.
Obviously, with completely different expectations, at different price tags and different everything. I do like Ohtani. I have him very similar to Erod as far as my rankings go. And also, I mean, we got Gausman coming. I mean, they're guys. I mean, plenty of pitching. If you don't want to play Scherzer, Giolito, for example. And I like Allard. I mean, Angels are nothing special, and he's 5K. That's the best I could describe it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Like last time, I think it was 5 days ago. I'm like, well, why should I play Harvey? I may as well play Kobe Allard. And then I ended up saying, why do I have to play either of these guys if I can play? And there was some 7K guy I played or something like that. And that's why I ended up not playing Harvey, I think, was because I ended up going up to 7K, and then Harvey got 24 and my 7K guy got like 4 or something like that.
There he goes.
So I think that's what's going to happen today. I think I'm going to say, why do I need to play Kobe Allard or Matt Harvey, for example, when I could play like Zach Thompson or something like that at 7K? So yeah, I mentioned earlier that Texas would be this kind of a funny hitting spot, but I don't think Ohtani is going to be as popular enough to really make that work for me. Like if Ohtani was going to be like the chalk, I would say maybe just try Texas just for just as some leverage. But aside from that, I like Ohtani. He's in play. I think Allard projects well, but I don't think I'm going to get to him, and that's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about the hitting entirely in this game, except for Upton and Garcia. There's no way on this slate that I can stack either of these teams. I don't think, especially with Ohtani being pitcher eligible, there's just nothing to do here. So I don't mind even if Texas did score on Ohtani. I'm not going to do it. I do like Ohtani, and I like Allard a little bit if you're going to go for a different type of build and spend down. But I don't think it's anything that I feel great about. And there are great pitching options, and we're about to get to another one of them in this next game. Where are you standing with Giolito?
Yeah, him and Scherzer. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
if you played a salary, site didn't consider salary, didn't consider ownership, whatever, play Giolito and Scherzer. Even considering salary, I think Scherzer's a real. I mean, Giolito is a very, very strong option here. But I just have nothing else to say. I mean, really, really good spot, and that's it. I mean, he's one of my top 2 pitchers.
Yeah, I love Giolito. Crazy K rate against these KC guys. It's kind of frustrating because last time he was unowned against them, and he was fine. He put up 22 fantasy points, but now we have him as chalky on another good pitching slate. He does have Ron Kolpa behind the plate, an excellent pitcher's umpire.
Yeah, you flex these freaking umpires like it came right out of there. Like, what was the guy's name? Who's this? Mega Kolpa?
Ron Kolpa. Mega Kolpa. Ron Kolpa. So I am interested in for sure in the Giolito thing. I think there's enough other value to play him with another expensive pitcher. But if you're going to go for a different build, I also could understand you leaving him off. I do have him as more of a priority than the guys like Ohtani and Erod, but I do like both of those guys as well. But for right now, I think that I'm gonna be a little bit higher on Giolito than in terms of ownership than the other guys. So I don't think I'm going to get to the White Sox stack tonight. There's an argument for it, but I mean, one thing is Carlos Hernandez. If you had an idea of how much this guy would pitch, like he did throw 6 innings against the same team, put up 22 fantasy points the last time they pitched, he's 5,600. The problem is that the only start of over 5 innings he's had all season, I believe. Yeah. So I don't know how exciting that is to me. And the White Sox have continually let me down. I get it. I'm just personally not going heavy on them. I prefer the other stacks a little bit better. That's where I'm at. And you do have a little wind blowing in from center as of right now. It's hard to know what it'll be later, but nothing huge. Just another excuse for me to feel a little bit better about Giolito and maybe not taking bats so much in this game. If I had to play one bat, it would be Moncada. I do think Eloy Jimenez and Cesar Hernandez are also really good plays, but I'm probably not going to play enough lineups to get to the White Sox stack tonight.
Okay, so let's move on. I don't want to say take a stand somewhere. I gotta come up with something. So my top non-Colorado Yankees stack right now, given ownership, given everything, happens to be St. Louis. So I'll just kind of throw that out there. And the guys that I have in are what should be a chalk, I would imagine, Dylan Carlson, 3,100. Paul Goldschmidt at 5,300. Whereas Tyler O'Neill at 3,500. And then Tommy Edman, he's still multi-position eligible.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's playing any of these guys, so there's no ownership here.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Edman,
shocked if anybody did.
And and I don't know, Bader. I mean, and I guess you could even afford probably Arenado if you want to do that for 600. But so I do like St. Louis. They're kind of like my favorite. Just something to do. Non-Yankee Colorado. They just rate the highest for me right now, and I don't think anybody's going to play them. So that's that. And I didn't get to either of the pitchers.
Yeah, I think that I would much rather, personally, I'm much more on the Atlanta side. It was really a bummer. They scored, say, those 6 runs in the first 2 innings yesterday. It looked like they were off to the races and never got another hit basically after that. But I would far prefer Atlanta to St. Louis. Smiley historically has been decent against righties. I know he's had some struggles recently. He's a much better pitcher than Jay Happ is. And
that's fair enough.
I don't think either of them are good pitchers. But in my opinion, I think at this point, Smiley is the better of the two. So I get it. I get that all the righties against the lefty and they're cheap. And I don't mind Carlson as a one-off because of his price, or Edman. But I just don't think I'm going to be able to get all that much exposure to this game outside of some of these Atlanta bats. Even Soler is an excellent play in the outfield at 3,300. Again, so many outfielders. Riley and Swanson would be my other favorites. And then Freddie Freeman, who no one plays against lefties, but really doesn't really matter for him, so you should consider it. Happ will give up stolen bases, so Ozzie Albies is a good play, which also lends itself to Swanson, as well. So I'm sort of flirting with the Atlanta stack, but I don't know that I'm actually going to try and close the deal here. Like, but they are another team that I'm looking at as a potential full stack.
I would like to before we move on, I would like to make the case against Giolito for a moment.
Go ahead.
And I'm like a little biased, whatever. So I had him the other last weekend when I actually had a pretty decent hit on him. I think they took him out after in the 6th inning or whatever it is, or the 7th inning. He pitched only 80 pitches in a 1-run game, and he pitched. I was ready for another 2 full innings. I was ready because look, he had 100, 106, 107, whatever it is. And are they winding him down? I just didn't get that at all. So maybe I'm just biased. Maybe I'm just still steamed that happened. And it cost him the win. That he actually, this team gave up the win in the bullpen gave up the win for him as well. So I'm a little concerned about that last game with respect to, I don't know, shutting him down or not running him out as much, but that would be my one gripe.
Yeah, it is a little weird that they only threw 80 pitches in the last time out. I know that they like their new bullpen, their 1, 2, 3 guys in the bullpen. So maybe 6 innings is where they're trying to keep it, but it did feel a little bit strange to me as well. I still feel good about using him, but I definitely understand the concerns. It's that time of year where you're going to see some of that stuff with certain pitchers. So definitely something to keep an eye on, and definitely something to be somewhat concerned about if you're not totally in love with Gio. Maybe that does sway things a little bit more for Erod and Ohtani, for sure. And the Red Sox do usually let Erod struggle through what his struggles, and Ohtani, unless he does get pulled out of the game early so often though. That's because he always has these weird injuries. But Ohtani is he's playing for an MVP. What else can you say? All right, do you want to talk about Colorado and this is really gross. I have one kind of gross take on this. I guess I'll just mention.
Go for it.
I'm like thinking about the possibility of using John Gray. And I just said there's a bunch of good pitchers. So why am I doing this exactly? It would be in a spend down build where I played him with another cheap pitcher and got all those Toronto and Yankees together, or the Colorado side of this game. But the Cubs lineup, I mean, I know it's Colorado, but this is not a major league looking lineup at all. With that, there's also some great value here. So you can make an argument on the other side for the value, but it's just really not a great lineup. So I'm going to try and pick on the Cubs the rest of the year. I just don't know. I don't know how much Gray I would actually get to on this slate because I like some other pitching. And maybe if he was like 5K, it'd be different. But it is something I'm considering doing just because they're so weak. And then I also think that the ownership for some reason, my early projections don't have Colorado being quite as crazily high owned as I would have thought. Are you seeing that, or?
I'm seeing the same thing. I'm seeing the Yankees as being the chalkiest, and then Colorado. Along with Chicago, and I see a little bit of a drop to Colorado.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Cheese, what a genius, by the way, he is. He's talking all day about this Hilliard guy. Hilliard, you got to play Hilliard, no matter what. It doesn't matter that he's batting 8th and all this. He's going to hit a home run. And of course he goes out there and he does. He puts up 29 fantasy points, It's a home run and double for good measure at 4 RBIs. I like the Colorado side of this against Mills. I don't think it's not, I think I do prefer the Yankees if you bet on which team was going to score more fantasy points, but they're not that far behind. And if they're really not going to be quite as high owned, I don't mind combo stacking them. I do think the Yankees, Colorado, and Toronto stand out. No big shocker there as the best offenses. And I'm just surprised that the ownership's going to be as low as it's currently projected. So mixing in Colorado and Chicago is probably still what I do rather than fully stacking, but I will probably have a Colorado stack or two tonight.
Cheese, since you brought him up, this could be my first one actually. So if you wanted to use RG, right? You can use True DFS as an affiliate code. Is that true?
Yeah, we have to set it all up and everything, but we also will have the optimizer ready very shortly so we can import Sheets directly into the RG optimizer.
But one thing about Cheese that very few people know, that he is a sneaky sneaky, super active League of Legends player.
Oh, I did not know that about him.
And the GPPs. Yeah, he's always in there. He's always in on. He's
on GPP stuff. I'm sorry, I thought you meant
he's always
I thought you meant
multi-entering.
he actually played League of Legends. I was like,
No. He's always multi-entering the LOL stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think the Colorado rates to be a very strong play. I think the Chicago rates to be a really, really strong play. And I think that they're both going to be sufficiently owned. And same as usual with these things. I mean, I'm not going to play Scherzer and Giolito along with Colorado and Chicago. You just can't win that way. I think you can play Chicago and Colorado if you do something like two of the other pitchers that are not those two guys. And I think that what you're suggesting might be a little over leverage to actually taking John Gray, but you actually are not even just doing for leverage. You actually believe that John Gray is in a good spot. You know what I mean? Like against Chicago, because Chicago is particularly weak. So it's not like you're just doing it to be a pain in the neck. You're actually, have an independent assessment that he's in a good spot as well. So
it's also like his last 4 starts, he's faced the Dodgers and Padres only. And and for those starts, he's averaging almost 20 fantasy points a game against those teams, including the game against the Dodgers in Colorado. And the 2 previous starts he made before that, he had 19 and 19 and 28 the one before that. So he's actually been consistently good now for a little while. And this Cubs lineup is really weak. But again, I don't mind. I'm probably not going to end up doing it because I like some other pitchers on the slate, as we've already talked about. But I do think that that playing some, you can definitely play these cheap Cubs. I just don't think I'm fully stacking them. It's going to be Bodie, Ortega, Wisdom, Happ, Contreras, but they're going to be mixing in for me. I'll leave out Duffy, Alcantara, and Hayward, but I do like the other guys quite a bit as individual 1 or 2 man things. And then Colorado, I mentioned taking pieces. Hilliard, even towards the bottom of the order, I still like a lot at his price. One of the better value plays in the slate. Also may end up at the top of the order, and then he'll become mega chalk. I like Ryan McMahon, and I like Trevor Story. It would be my favorite 3 to use probably. And you can always use Nunez as the catcher at 2,500. And Brendan Rodgers is fine. Colorado is in a really solid spot. I don't think Mills is like the worst ever, but I do think this is a good spot for them. And if they're going to be as owned as they're projected right now, I think we want to get some exposure to them. So
what about Alex Mills?
Yeah, you're not playing him.
Okay.
This guy just pitched 6 innings and had no strikeouts in the game. I can't do it.
Right.
He has 1 strikeout in his last, what is it now? 13 innings. That's really
I'll tell you who's going to have more than 1 strikeout in 13 innings. That's going to be Kevin Gauss.
All right, let's get into that because this is the other spot we're looking at for pitcher, right? I do like Kevin Gausman here. That's going to be pretty much the majority of my interest in this game, but I am a very big fan of Gausman. And I'm trying to
come right out. He can mow them all down, right? He can get 13 strikeouts in this game, no?
Well, Arizona does not that they strike out so much, just that they're really, really inept offensively. And he's had some tougher matchups lately. It hasn't been nearly as good as he was earlier in the season, but it's hard to know if some of it's matchup based. He did get roughed up by the Pirates, which is a little weird. But his last time out, he struggled against Houston. He gave up, he gave up a big home run, and that was pretty much what cost him. Worked up his pitch count, but he did have 9 strikeouts and 4 1/3. He's awesome, and he's going to have ownership. I have him just ahead of Ohtani and Erod. I think Gausman and Scherzer certainly makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, the reason why Gausman makes some sense is that I think he can get 30. And I kind of would like a guy that could actually get the 30 and not rely on either Giolito or Scherzer busting. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I think Gausman's in play. And with that said, I don't know if I'm going to play him. We'll see how many lineups I get to.
Yeah, my only one, obviously there's a lot of guys, people argue for stacking the Giants. I'm not going to tell you to stack everybody, so that's not what I'm doing. It's a horrible bullpen behind Gallen. Makes plenty of sense, except for the stadium is not the ideal stadium to stack in on this kind of a slate, in my opinion. But Chris Bryant, obviously, but the main one for me would be Lamont Wade, assuming that he's back in the lineup at 3.5. I love him as a play. I think the price hasn't caught up to his talent level, and he's really shown something when he's played lately. He's got a ton of, he's shown the power off. The guy's good, man. He's going to be real good for years to come. Does have a little bit of speed to go with it, and I believe in Wade, so he would be the one I would play as a one-off, possibly at first base, because I like the outfield. All right, you want to talk about these? So Scherzer's going to be the chalk. He's going to be my highest owned pitcher. You have the extreme hitters umpire in tonight's game. I don't care one slight bit. Mark Carlson, but I'm playing Scherzer. Right? It's simple as that. He's going to be in my main lineup on DK unless something really weird happens.
You want any hitting or?
I love the Dodgers.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. Let's just take a look real quick at Odorizzi. So Odorizzi has look, he's a professional pitcher, okay, who gives up a lot of hard contact. I mean, Seattle just roughed him up the other day. They were hitting on him. They were running on him. I actually think they threw out one of those guys, but he's this is not like a matchup he's faced. If you look at the teams he's faced, they've all been really weak, including that Yankee. He faced the weakest of the Yankee lineups. And I just think he could really struggle with the Dodgers getting back to fully healthy. I know they struggled last night against the McCullers. I thought they would have a better game. I only had one little Dodger stack, but still, in general, I think that this is a really good spot. The problem I'm having is that I actually think they're going to have ownership. So if you're asking me to compare them with Colorado, the Yankees, and Toronto, I have them beneath those teams. I love them to get off of those other guys. But if they're going to be owned similarly, I am not going to do that as much. I will stick with my favorite stacks. I love Seager here. I love Muncy. I want the power lefties against Odorizzi the most. I love Bellinger. So that's the Dodgers I have as my fourth stack right now, my fourth favorite stack. But they're pretty close with Atlanta and Philadelphia. So I will let ownership be somewhat of the dictate some of that. And I think that playing Philly can potentially be more lucrative. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't get to any of the hitting, but you could play if you're in the mood. You could play Michael Brantley at 2,700 if you don't want to play Scherzer. Just as
so much value.
What's that?
It is really cheap.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But there's just so much value out there, and he's not a home run hitter really, so can't really.
Right.
For me, Brantley, I think he hasn't hit a home run and 2 in the last month. Maybe, I don't know. That's my issue with him. But I mean, I would love him.
I think he's battling a prop. Monkey Knife Fight is a prop up to him and Magnevia Sierra for the most bases on the slate. We'll see how.
By the way, we have Monkey Knife Fight as an affiliate now, guys. Sign up there for your first. What is it? I think $50 for free for the first 50. I can't remember exactly what it is, but we're going to set up a thing where if you sign up to Monkey Knife Fight, we're going to give you guys a free premium for some period of time at some point. We're just working on that affiliate stuff set up right now. But so you're into Scherzer and you're not into the Dodgers.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's recap it a little bit here. I have my main pitchers. Scherzer is number 1 for me. And then I'm struggling as a number 2. I think it's Gausman, honestly, ahead of Gio a little bit. And then I would go Gio, Ohtani, Erod. And then for the spend downs, it's Thompson, Gray, and Allard. Well, I'll fine tune that a little bit more and give you my exact ownership percentages later. But that's what I've got for right now. How about you for pitching?
Yeah, something about the Gio thing stinks. I don't know what, you know what I mean? Again, maybe I'm just biased. I'm just game log watching. I just don't like the pitch count trend. But I do have them both as my top 2 right now. But I think that there's ceiling out of a lot of these other guys. Like Erod's play against Detroit. Ohtani's, always capable of throwing up a ceiling. Gausman can throw up a ceiling. So I feel as though that, some pairing other than Sergio Giolito is probably what you're supposed to do. The other thing is that paying down, I am kind of into the Zach Thompson or Carrasco, but probably not. Probably the Zach Thompson idea. So if my big lineup, if I'm going to hand build, it's probably not going to be Scherzer, Giolito. It's going to be either Scherzer, Thompson, something like that, or just totally no Scherzer, and maybe double mid, like maybe like Erod, Gausman, or something nutso like that. Because both those guys, by the way, like Erod and Gausman, they could both score the same as Scherzer. Well, they should. They're the same freaking price, without at lower ownership, and so that's that. With respect to hitting, again, I'm back to the Chicago, Colorado. Yankees are probably the most likely of them all, but they're going to be high owned, so you got to find something. So I'll go back to St. Louis. I forgot to mention that I do like Baltimore a little bit against Talion. Just again, those cheap guys are still cheap. And there's a couple of other one-offs which I forgot to mention as we got through these. And again, this is nothing earth-shattering, but Rafael Ortega 2,500 is obviously a really, really strong play. Then there's Santander, who I just kind of alluded to from Baltimore. Then some of these Cleveland guys that I kind of glossed over. I mean, Miles Straw, he's not gonna, he's 2,300, whatever. Oscar Mercado is a flat 2K. It goes to show what you're saying. There's just value all over the goddamn place. So
yeah, and I actually think that you just mentioned, like, honestly, I think those last two are two of the worst values because you don't have any power. But because look, you've got Ramirez with power at 2,600. You've got Soler at 3,100. Bodie at 2,600 in Colorado. Ortega at 2,600, who you did mention. Upton at 3,300. Alfaro's 2K with power. Carlson 3.1 power. Hilliard 2.4, tons of power. Edmund 3.2. Just there's so many guys to fill in if you want to do your stack. So when that happens, it's harder for me to go down a pitch. At the same time, there's outfielders that I want to prioritize, and a lot of those guys are outfielders. Unfortunately, not all of them, but a lot of them are. But I hear you. I mean, those are my list of the value guys, and it's not that I don't love I don't think Straw's any good, and sure, maybe he'll hit a home run once every 30 games. I just can't play guys like that when there's this other value at the same price who actually have power. He does have stolen base upside, though. I'll give him that.
I do not blame you.
And then in terms of individual one-offs that I love that you can use in stacks or as one-offs, but I love JD Martinez, but I'm not stacking Boston. I love Soto, Gallo, Stanton. Some of these are not off the board. Happ, Wisdom, Wade is going to be way off the board. And those are just the guys I had for my initial run as one-offs, but I'll update my sheets for those of you at TrueDFS.com. Remember, you can do a month for free right now, $35 a month after that, but you can always change your mind, of course, if you don't want to keep it going. And if you do, great. You can grow with us. And yeah, Sheets, anything else before we get out of here?
No, we're gonna come back and do a little no-cut golf.
Oh God, my least favorite, the no cuts. I love the cut sweats.
Yep.
All right. Good luck to everybody out there. Hopefully somebody crushes it tonight. Let us know how y'all do. Talk to you guys soon.